There's one of my favorite lines in all of this show is I can't even remember. I think it actually might be the genetic compatibility episode, but I can't remember for sure. But Veronica says to Ted, she's like, blah 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 blah. Are you happy now, Mr. Cynical? And Ted replies with, technically, Mr. Cynical can't be happy. It's his power and his curse.
Welcome back to episode 66 of the Laser Comb Podcast, your favorite podcast where two dudes from the 90s scroll through their classic television with a fine-tooth Lazor. I am one of your hosts, NeoCal, and I am joined by the prestigious Christopher Siege.
Make it rain for all the money I make off of Patreon subscribers.
Right. Like those loonies and toonies.
It's like those loonies and toonies, eh?
Loonies and berries.
Loonies and toonies. Take off your G-string, bud.
Can't. Because I'm not wearing one.
Pow chicka bow wow.
Today on that's right, Lasercomb 66. We're almost achieving nice status with the Lasercomb podcast.
We're gonna have to do. I didn't even think about this before. But we're gonna have to do a very sexy show for episode 69. I don't know what it is
like
yet.
What's that one with David Duchovny?
Red Shoe Diary. Yeah, fuck it. Yeah, let's do an episode of Red Shoe Diary.
You immediately knew what I was talking about.
Hopefully it's one of the episodes that had Arnold Vosloo in it, because that guy's awesome. He played Imhotep in the 1999 Mummy movie. Yeah, he was in a few episodes of the Red Shoe Diaries.
It was like, oh, that name sounds so familiar, and he was the Mummy.
Yeah, that
great.
guy's rad.
Yeah,
he was in the live action G.I. Joe movie too, as Zartan, I think.
Went dark. Zartan.
Yeah. G.I. Joe character. Member of Cobra. Cobra
just wants to make the world a better place.
By attacking the Statue of Liberty and their planes getting shot down by G.I. Joe, who is there. And we see them, always see them parachuting out of their destroyed jets. Because
G.I. Joe doesn't kill.
No, they're like Batman.
Yeah.
And Superman.
And isn't it convenient that there are so many safety systems in place in Cobra vehicles?
Right?
Their safety standards must be through the roof, actually. And indeed, why would you take that job knowing how dangerous it is?
Well, and I'm willing to bet money that they're with all the safety mechanisms in their technology, that they weren't developed by Viridian Dynamics.
That was a good point.
Segue.
That's the best segue we've probably ever done on the show, because we are reviewing a random episode of Better Off Ted today. One of Siege's
episode 5
favorite shows
of Better Off Ted, Win Some, Dose Some, which originally aired on April 15th of 2009. So as Cal just said, this is one of my favorite shows of all time. And how I discovered this show was back when Netflix first launched in Canada, which I think was in late 2010. Launched as a streaming only service. Right. We never had the DVD in the mail system here in Canada. There wasn't a lot on it, and in fact for a couple of years there, it was pretty common to hear people Canadians shit talk Netflix and about it being a waste of money and whatnot, and for fucking $7.99 a month. I'm like, quite literally, if you watch like two movies, it's already paid for itself. So
Right.
I never understood that ire that people had, but there wasn't.
Especially given how expensive renting movies used to be.
Yeah, we're just and as a Canadian, like I've been saying this for years. Like we're behind the times on we're usually a few years behind on a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a joke in How I Met Your Mother from made by Robin, who the character is supposed to be Canadian. And in one episode, she says the '80s didn't come to Canada until 1993. It's kind of on point.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, when
Episode 5.
Netflix first launched in Canada, there wasn't nearly as much content on it as there because of licensing issues as there was in on the United States version of the service. And a lot of that has to do with the CRTC, which is a thing I can rant about literally for hours, and I'm not going to because that's not going to mean anything to anyone but that's not going to mean anything to anyone outside of Canada. But yeah, so there wasn't a ton of things on Netflix. And so two of the things that I ended up gravitating toward was Mad Men, because at the time, like I think the first two or three seasons of Mad Men were on there. And I'm like, oh, this show's great. And the other one was Better Off Ted. Now, Better Off Ted is a workplace sitcom that aired for two seasons originally on ABC from 2009 to 2010. Uh, I watched the show on a whim on Netflix, and in like late 2010 or early 2011, somewhere around there, and immediately fell in love with this show. I've watched through this series numerous occasions, like multiple times, like probably like 10 times
Okay.
now.
Okay.
I find
Oh, wow.
I find this show astoundingly funny. And
And I think that's why the Netflix thing is part of why it kind of just went under my radar. Is I was like, oh, right, that's that like show with like the boring thumbnails that like was one of the first shows on Netflix. Right. Because you just see people in like a suit. And I'm like, well,
well, and here's the thing, and the thing
I
with
didn't
this
even
show,
realize the premise of it.
the thing with the show is like the cover art is just the titular character Ted, played by Jay Harrington, who is great, but he's a very like generic looking dude in a suit
Mm-hmm.
with a title called Better Off Ted, which is a very generic title and
It
tells you
is. It is.
absolutely nothing about the show at all.
Yeah. And
I
it's just
think
like, okay, white dude in the suit. The title's named after him. Like, why do I want to check this out?
like I hear a title Better Off Ted and I think of something like Full House.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah. It's probably about like, oh, I mean, Ted is a single dad in the show, but
I
it it's probably about like, oh, a single dad and the antics like him and his like four kids get up to, and like Uncle Jesse is living in the attic.
and
uh,
it does, that's a good point. It does indeed kind of seem like a slice of life title where like, single dad's trying his best and maybe there's semantics or whatever. And it's like,
Slice of life comedy. That's a good way to describe what a title like Better Off Ted implies.
yeah,
That is very much not what this show is. I
as
think
I had discovered. Yes,
the title does the show a disservice, and
it
I've been
does.
saying this for years. I think the show probably would have had a much higher viewership. I don't know, maybe not. Would have had a higher viewership if it had a different title. But also, and the reason why it occurred to me to review this show was on the last episode of the Lasercomb podcast. Cal had mentioned like a show being too clever for its own good,
Yeah,
and
what did I
it,
say that in response to?
I think it was the Clerks cartoon.
Yeah, yeah,
And
definitely.
indeed, I think this show is just too clever to be a like network, like an ABC like primetime network comedy. I
Well, indeed, you compare this comparatively, what we're looking at here in terms of what something is trying to achieve, and I don't mean this to insult of one over the other, but this is like a better and more clever uh Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
That before anyone comes at me or gets or hates that show and is a fan of Better Off Ted or whatever,
Like me.
they both have clever, me too, I'd argue, but they both have clever uh
Big Bang Theory does have positives to it, and even
oh
like
yeah, I've watched a lot of it.
so have I. Like even
Yeah.
other like Chuck Lorre like sitcoms like Two and a Half Men, like even that show has like
I've
good
watched a lot
qualities
of
about
that.
it.
Yeah.
Like they're
But it's
easy to
not
shit
something I'll go back to watch.
they're easy to shit talk because there is a lot of things to shit talk, but they are also like mildly amusing and entertaining when you're just randomly watching them.
And there's a difference. And that's what I mean by too clever for its own good. There's popcorn like humor where you can miss half of and by design, you can walk in on the second half of Big Bang Theory
Yep.
and watch the rest and go, ha ha ha,
Yeah.
Leonard's a nerd. Um, Whereas something like this,
Sheldon has autism.
Sheldon's asexual and has autism. Isn't that funny? They're playing Xbox.
They read comic books.
They read
Fucking
comic
nerds.
books. Wow, wait a second. Or there's two people that watch that. There's that guy that we just made up. And then there's the I myself am something of a nerd, and not to gatekeep nerd pastimes, but like if you're think you're a nerd because you like Big Bang Theory, then you're actually not a nerd.
No. Well, and that was one of my big issues with that show was like it was very much like a boomer idea of like what a geek is.
Kinda,
Like
yeah.
someone who is not who has never been a part of that culture whatsoever. It's their outsider like take on it. And I'm like, no, this actually offends me as like someone who's kind of a nerd like and has like many like geeky friends like
Right.
yeah.
And it's like the idea of these people like, PhD master's degree, like people like struggling to do day and day things. It's like, okay, are we making fun of neurodivergence now? Or are we
Yeah.
making fun of their geekism?
Yeah.
And the show is on the premise of making fun of their geekdom,
But
but
but also it makes fun of it openly
it
mocks
heavenly
the
mocks the characters,
yeah for
whether
their
it's
like
the blonde
neurodivergence.
bimbo or the, yeah, right? And the normal character. Whereas in this, I feel like there's a revelry in it. The Leonard and Sheldon of this, which we will get into
Lemon
later,
Phil.
are, well, enough about comparing them, but this is the too clever for its own good version of Big Bang Theory. Big Bang Theory is the popcorn, like, haha, this is for the everyman to like pop in and go, ah, I too am an enjoyer of Rick and Morty. I'm smart. That's why I watch Rick and Morty. I'm smart and I have a dark sense of humor. Look out, ladies.
if you
Pickle
don't
Rick
like
is here.
if you don't like Rick and Morty, it's because you're not intelligent enough to understand it. I've actually had someone tell me that.
Probably not saying that anymore after the creator just got fucking
Well,
shackled.
co-creator.
Co-creator, sorry.
I really wanted to like Rick and Morty because one of the co-creators was Dan Harmon, who created Community, which I fucking
I,
love.
I love Community.
Fuck, we should review Community on the next
There we
episode
go.
of this
There's the
show.
next one.
Yeah.
There we go, folks. I fucking the show we both really like. Um Community, and yeah, Dan Harmon. The seasons without Dan Harmon. Let me just say, you can tell
They
the
when
special sauce is missing.
when they fired him after season 3, there was a dip in quality there.
It's you can almost like feel it and see it in the eyes of the actors too.
Yeah. That episode, I think it was a late season 2 episode. The episode where fuck, what are they
We'll get
playing?
in. can't quite remember what it.
They're playing some like game, and like the main character is about to like throw a dice and or a die, and
It's not D&D, or is it? Or anyways, yeah, that's
the multiple timelines
the
episode.
timelines
That is one
episode.
of the
Great.
greatest. That is one of the greatest 22 minutes of television ever produced, in my opinion.
So good. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's like uh, you realize by Abed is like you realize by asking me to roll this dice that there is now going to be six simultaneous
Six different
splitting
timelines.
timelines. One where I and
And
each timeline could have drastically different effects
and
on the
Jeff is like,
continuum.
"Of course there is, Abed. Whatever," and like throws the die. And then
And
indeed
then
we
we get
get
to see each one.
different timeline. The way the episode, like I said, one of the greatest 22
Fuck,
minutes
that's
of
directed
television
so well. Yeah,
ever produced, in my opinion.
agreed. And I have not something I have not seen before. Is any, I'm not sure if I even mentioned this episode yet, any Better Off Ted. I didn't even know what the premise was.
Yeah.
So when I had started watching this, I was like, oh, wait, this is fucking cool.
Yeah.
They're in like like a privatized sector of like uh
A big
I don't,
like multinational like pharmaceutical
far,
not even
they're
pharmaceutical, but like they Viridian
multi
Dynamics, which is the company that the characters in this show work for. They kind of do
defense,
everything.
arms dealing, pharmaceutical. Yeah, they've got their, it's a mega core kind of
Yeah.
development building that let's say.
So let me ask you before we get into like
Oh, okay.
recapping what happens in the episode. Do you see why I like this show so much?
Yeah, in like 2 minutes, I saw why you liked this so much. Like immediately. I was like, okay. Like I like this. And again, not to shit talk or compare like one to the other because their audiences are different, right? I don't need a laugh track in the background telling me when one of the someone with autism or social anxiety says something stupid,
Right. Yeah,
right?
I
And
hate laugh
indeed, it
tracks.
revels in its cleverness instead. So I don't feel like I'm laughing at the characters, like laughing with them or experiencing their turmoil. And there's a
Rewatching
difference in that.
rewatching this episode yesterday for like the like 50th time or so, like I found it really clever how like the B plot of the episode, which is like two, it's basically like two like subplots that converge with one another. The wrapping paper subplot and the like whole thing with the like rations that kill people and Ted having to meet with the general. Those are like
The C, right? That no, that's the
those
B whole B plot. Yeah,
those are two separate subplots that actually converge with one another, and I find that really clever.
I'm actually really shocked. Usually, there's two different things coming along, and like whatever, right? Like it doesn't touch. They don't touch on each other. But for them to make like a cohesive story, that well written, which we'll get into,
Yeah.
but for it to be episodic to an extent too,
Yep.
um, that's not really easy to do. And I'm actually like I was actually really surprised. And sometimes there's a good episode, but like the B plot or the C plot, you're kind of like, whatever. But like it ties in so well that when you started talking about like the B plot, I was like, what is he talking about? Oh, right, the fucking wrapping paper thing. That it feels like
Yeah,
I
like
don't know what to say.
the
I'm
the like the wrapping paper and the whole thing with the general. Those are like two separate subplots, but they end up like converging with one another and like
really well,
becoming one subplot by the
and
end.
in a humorous
And in a very
like,
amusing way. Like it's I can't gush about this show enough. Like this show is
what that like
really well
clever,
written.
that clever looping of like the B plot and like the subplots into it reminds me of is the Good Place.
Yeah, I watched the first season of The Good Place. I need to go back to it.
I That's another show that I this reminds me of that, which makes me want to watch this.
I I read a review recently of the series finale of Ted Lasso, and the chick who wrote the review was just shit talking Ted Lasso so much, and she called it like, which like I was in tear, like happy crying, sad crying, like
Right.
angry crying during the entire series finale of Ted Lasso. That is a show that will make you feel everything.
No shit.
Um, Ted Lasso is great. It's one of the best shows of all time, in my opinion. But like this reviewer was just absolutely shit talking the series finale and talking about how it was such a garbage show and how it was like just easily digestible, like throwaway entertainment, like The Big Bang Theory or The Good Place. And everyone in the comment section was like, "Wait, why are you bashing The Good Place? Like, don't compare it to The Big Bang Theory."
Yeah. Now here's the thing: you can say something successful because they are successful for two different reasons. And again, you don't have to like Big Bang Theory to acknowledge its many seasons and its fucking spin-off, Young
Oh
Sheldon,
yeah, right.
which my partner didn't know existed. She thought I was like making fun
I
of
for
something.
I forgot that existed until you just brought it up.
Go on Netflix and look at how many seasons there are.
Of Young Sheldon. How
It's
many?
more than one.
Jesus. I know the Big
Okay,
Bang
folks.
Theory lasted for like 11 or 12 seasons
Like
or something like that.
immensely successful. It got to the point where just the actors wanted to do other things.
Yeah.
Like it could have still been going, right?
The actors are just like, for fuck's sake, we're tired of this job. Like,
Right? Like we're yeah.
we're ready to
Um
move on.
yeah. And again, like what something that's and are there 11 seasons of Better Off Ted?
No, there
No.
are two. It was canceled due to low ratings.
But this episode's kind of better than any episode I've ever watched of Big Bang Theory.
Yeah,
So what
100%.
is successful is not the same thing as what is good. If you've watched anything in Lasercomb Productions, Too Much Energon, Alphanumeric, um, Lasercomb podcast, like whatever we've ranted about, man, those are not the same thing. And we try to acknowledge the reasons like for both. And this show is too clever for its own good. And I didn't even have to Google it. I'm like, you know what? This feels like Firefly. This feels really fucking good. And people have different opinions of Firefly or whatever, but me,
Yeah, I'm in the
I love
minority, but I'm not a big
Firefly,
fan of Firefly.
but I can see what and how it was like aired was a nightmare. But I can
Yeah.
see why it wouldn't last that long. This, right? I could see why it wouldn't last that long because like Family Guy, like a billion like seasons, right? You can skip any one season, you can watch any episode, whatever, right? And then
Right.
you have what we were talking about in previous episodes, Clerks, right? Like
Yeah.
actually clever, like actually written by people that like really care about the project, hilarious inside jokes about the Korean animation team. It it's so fucking clever that there's going to be a few people that really like it and
The
most
major
people that can't.
the majority of people, the humor is just going to fly over their head.
And
This is
that's not a I watch this show because how pedestrian of you to uh like this. I watch Invader Zim
yeah.
or whatever, right? It's not that I watch like Better Off Ted because it's clever. It's just that it's not popcorn TV.
No, not at all. No, and indeed, like I stumbled across this show like quite randomly, and just I was on its wavelength like immediately.
So was I. And this is episode 5.
Five, yeah.
In
Win
like
some,
30
go some.
seconds, like a minute, like in or whatever, I was like, got it. I know who everyone is. I know what the fucking plot is. Let's go. Right. And it's hard to do that. And when it's done well, it's something I really, really like. but the things I really, really like tend not to last
Yeah.
that long.
This
But
isn't even the best episode of the show either, in my opinion. Like, it's a good one. Like, I think on the last episode of the Lasercomb podcast, I think we rolled 3 times, and then we finally just settled on
and you're
this
like,
one.
okay,
I'm
this one.
I'm like, this is a good one. This is one of the good ones. They're all good. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
but this isn't even the best episode of the show either, and it's still like really fucking good.
Yeah, so the let's start running through
Yeah, yeah. Let's
the
move on to
episode
it.
while we introduce the characters.
So, Lem and Phil, two very lovable and awkward scientists who work down in the R&D department of Viridian Dynamics.
Great actors.
Great, yeah, yeah. I love these two. Anytime I see them pop up in things randomly, like the guy who plays Lem, Malcolm Barrett is his name. He has a recurring role in The Boys. So when I first saw him, I was like,
Right.
"Hey, it's Lem. Sweet." The guy
Yeah.
still works. Great. He
Hell yeah.
deserves it.
Um and
So so they're playing a needle game where they use syringes and throw them up at the ceiling.
much like in an office, like a hotel or a boring office job or whatever, you have people competing with the pencils,
Yeah.
sharpened like pencils. So right away, that's fucking hilarious to me because it's so opposite of what you should be doing in a lab. Like again, it's like the pencil joke,
Yeah.
right? But they're casually doing it with sterilized syringes.
And like they're scientists, like they really should be actually doing a science instead of
And
just
doing
throwing
this.
instead of just throwing syringes
So
at the
they're having
ceiling.
some downtime as they're waiting for whatever. And
Yeah.
it's just hilarious to me that they're like wasting like sterile like syringes like doing this. It's not like pencils where you just write with the pencil. So right away, I'm like, okay, I like this. I don't know what's going on, but I like this.
So
And the argument is like it has to stay embedded in the ceiling for like 60 seconds or whatever without
yeah,
falling.
yeah. And they get caught immediately by their boss, the titular character Ted Crisp.
Uh-huh. And there's this back and forth between them. Again, I've only seen this, but I understand the dynamic. The back and forth between them is Ted knows that they're fucking around,
Yep.
but he ribs them lightly,
Yeah.
right? He gives them a certain leeway, like, right? So it's lightly ribbing, pretends he doesn't see what the fuck they're up to, and kind of gives him a hard time, and then like goes about his way. And they established that relationship so succinctly that I was like, okay, yeah, I got it. He's not a tyrant.
Now Ted is supposed to be the protagonist of this show. This is very much a what's the word I'm looking for? Ensemble. It's an
Uh-huh.
ensemble show. That's the word I
Ensemble,
was
yeah, ensemble cast, yeah.
that's the word I was looking for. But Ted is the titular character, and we actually get like a glimpse into his home life, unlike the rest of the characters. So
Which I like because he's so unlikable until I get that glimpse.
see, I find Ted and the actor who plays him, Jay Harrington, who's great. Everyone's great in this show, but he's a very like lovable and likable uh, protagonist in
Oh
my
no, I
opinion.
don't dislike it, but what I mean is just in the like nothing interesting, nothing like new kind of thing.
Right.
But then little parts came out throughout this episode where I was like, okay,
Even
I
his daughter is great. Like I usually hate kid characters in shows, but like even she's great in this show.
you know what it is? It's all about morsel size, I want to say, to use that analogy. There's not too much fucking kid in
Yeah.
the episode. Well, that sentence sounds there's there's not there's not too much screen time on the kid where I'm like, oh, I don't care about this like kids like blah 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 at school, but there's just enough where it's funny, and you're like, oh no,
And
and how they
like
like talk. Get to it later, but when he has that conversation, and it's like,
the Mickey Mouse bit.
Yeah.
And how she just goes like straight faced and is like, and just turns her head slowly. Like, that's great. That's great acting from a child.
I was surprised. Yeah. So that her being so complimentary to the humor,
Yeah,
um, and him Ted balancing all of that.
right.
Also, kudos for him not being despicable in the first season and then becoming good. Kudos for showing actually he can show empathy, and
Yeah.
I'm getting ahead
Oh,
of myself, but
yeah, yeah. Even from like the first episode, like it establishes Ted as
he's
like a
not a
really
sociopath.
as like a really likable guy.
Yeah.
Um, the sociopath in this show is Veronica, played by Portia
Oh
de
man,
Rossi.
she's almost too much for me, but I there's some
She's
humanizing
yeah.
characteristics to her that sorry, go on. Yeah, you were saying
I was gonna
this
say
character.
she is straight up a sociopath, very self-involved, very narcissistic, um, but she's also likable in her own way. And it's 100% down to the performance from Portia de Rossi, who
Yeah.
most people know from Arrested Development.
Yeah. Yes. Hard, almost hard to believe it's the same actress.
Yeah, very, very different characters.
Very different characters.
So Ted interrupts Lem and Phil while they're playing this game and catches them immediately. And he's come down to sell them wrapping paper because his daughter Rose is there's a competition at her school to sell like enough rolls of wrapping paper, and whoever sells the most like wins a trip to Disneyland. And so Ted is like, uh,
Using the leverage of catching them fucking around. Oh
yeah,
yeah, so I'll put you down for
10 rolls.
10 rolls each.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, tell you what, since I see that you're busy and lunch is about to start, I'll yeah, and just the way he does that, and they're just like, oh, it's the way it's bullying.
And
But
the way Ted puts explains the competition too. He's like, so whichever kid at the school sells the most wrapping paper gets a trip to Disneyland, and whoever comes in second gets to cry as their reward because Rose is going to Disneyland.
because Rose is going to Disneyland, and so he is extremely ambitious,
Yeah,
right? Like he's a winner. I That's what I mean by too clever for its like own good. Like there's no laugh track, there's no pause in a laugh track and having all the just characters smile and
yeah,
like look at each other or like do this, right? Like if you turn away or you check your phone for like a little bit, you don't see like how well written like sentence to sentence conversation is.
yeah.
Yeah.
So so yeah, Lem and Phil like agree to buy 10 rolls of wrapping paper, and Ted like walks away, and then we get introduced to Linda, played by Andrea Anders. And let me tell you, I have had the maddest crush on Andrea Anders since the first time I saw this show.
You don't say.
Uh-huh. Like she's beautiful, and I think she's like charming as all hell. She's also, I mentioned Ted Lasso earlier. She has a minor role in Ted Lasso. Yeah. So anyway, Linda shows up and is talking to Lem and Phil about how she needs like a project from them, like paperwork or something like that from them. And one of the needles from the ceiling falls down and falls into sticks into her shoulder, and her reaction is she just kind of side eyes it, and she's like, "I really hate coming down here."
Like doesn't freak out, doesn't like yell or like whatever, just like
Just in a very defeated way, is like, "I hate coming down here." And so Lem pulls the needle out, and he's like, "Let me get you a band-aid." And so he grabs a band-aid, puts it on her shoulder, and he's
I like
like,
that super awkward when she like
eh,
pulls her shirt to the side and
he's like, "There's your shoulder."
human, human, female.
Yeah. And he's like,
There's a
"And
shoulder.
there's your lady shoulder."
And fuck yeah.
Yeah. And sticks the band-aid onto her shoulder, and she's like, "Look, guys, just get the get the whatever like on my desk by the end of the day, and I'm gonna pretend that I didn't hear the word lady shoulder.
Yeah. And
Oh,
off she goes. And uh uh the other guy, not Lem,
Phil.
Phil, is like, what did you just grab that adhesive from over here?
Yeah, he's
These
like,
aren't band-aids.
these aren't band-aids. He's like, we ran out of band-aids that time when you were wondering what I would look like with a mustache. Which is just a line of dialogue, and it puts an image in your head that is hysterical.
Right? But also, like, I have questions. And the show just moves on with
Yeah.
that, right?
This
So what
this
these actually are,
this is one of the rare shows where like the jokes come a mile a minute, and usually in most comedy where like the jokes come a mile a minute, it's usually one great one followed by like a bunch of duds, and then you get like a good one and then a bunch of duds, and then you get like another great one and a bunch of duds. This show, it's just like a rapid fire series of really funny bits of
yeah,
dialogue.
that or instead of dialogue for a show, the entirety of Family Guy,
Yeah.
where every once in a while, yes, I will admit that there are very funny episodes or very funny jokes.
Yeah, I'll take 6,000 chicken vaginas and
I'll take 6,000 chicken fajitas.
and a sausage McBiscuit, please.
Sausage McBiscuit. Exactly. And here's the thing, there's nothing funny about that. It's funny the way it's said,
Yeah.
right? But this is the opposite humor. We're not laughing at anybody, we're laughing at what they say, which that's the point I was trying to distinguish between Better Off Ted and Big Bang Theory. I'm
Yeah.
laughing at what they're saying. I'm not laughing because the characters are dumb.
Yeah.
So we find
So
out that that was not an ordinary
that
bandage.
that wasn't actually a band-aid. That was a experimental energy patch that they had developed. So they quickly realized that they just drugged Linda.
Yes, and they leave it vague as to what that tends to mean, but like,
It,
given the
it doesn't even
position they're
matter,
in,
really.
it doesn't even matter it in. But basically, like, kind of how I pictured it, it's like, if soldiers are behind enemy lines and they need to stay awake for 72 hours, this is the kind of thing that they might have.
This is an energon injection.
Or
Ah!
that drug in what's that called? Soldier, with Van Damme and
Oh, Universal Soldier.
Universal
Yeah.
Soldier. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so we cut to a board meeting that's going on, and they're talking about this project that they have to airdrop like supply food and supplies to refugees. And they're
Mhm.
like, wow, this is actually the first thing that Viridian Dynamics has developed that doesn't kill people. Oh, wait, except there's one problem. It kills people.
It kills people.
And so they need to come up with like a way to cut cost
Market
both
this, cut costs, and then remarket it.
and remarket it. Um, and so Ted is like, but enough about that. And Lem and Phil are immediately like, is this about the wrapping paper thing? And Ted's like, no, no, this is about a little girl's dream. Goes full like marketing mode about it, which I love. And
At the board
Linda
meeting. Yeah.
at the board meeting, and Linda is in the funniest bit in this episode, in my opinion. Linda is like, of course we can do it. This is the greatest science team ever assembled. And she gets up because she's now like hyped up from the energy patch. And she's like, let's do it. And turns around and runs away. And everyone kind of looks and is like, where is she going? And Phil is like, to do it?
Do it. Yeah. And it's hard to sell it because we're just like two dudes recounting it, but like the delivery and how she picks herself up and she like literally like sprints out of like the room. Um,
Like she's super hyped up and like
but
really
like
happy and really
what is she
enthusiastic.
doing? Where is she going? Yeah.
And
And
then
it's the
Phil,
delivery of the lines.
and then Phil, who is fucking great. He's played by Jonathan Slavin. Give him, give him a shout out.
Mhm.
He's great, and his delivery is just like as he shrugs, he's and raises his hands. He's like, "To do it."
Do they end up admitting what they did to anyone else, or
Eventually, yes, in the
eventually?
episode.
Oh, no, no, right, yeah, when it comes out.
Right. So, from there, Veronica, as I mentioned, as played by Portia de Rossi, tells Ted that he's going to have to meet with this general to like sell him on uh, buying these things at a higher cost, basically. And she's like, well, he, and Ted's like, well, why me? And he's like, well, and she's like, well, the general really likes you. You know, you're a shrewd businessman and blah blah blah. Basically, and she's like, you're the total package, Ted. Oh, and he likes your package too. So the general's gay and has a thing for
Yeah,
Ted.
yeah. And yeah, so she's making these jokes, she's alluding to it, he's pretending he doesn't understand,
Yeah,
but then she
yeah.
just, oh yeah, and he likes your package too.
See, and a show that isn't this clever, this could easily have just turned into gay panic humor.
Mm-hmm.
But the show actually handles it in a really funny way.
I actually really like it, and it's in a way that's not exploitative
Yeah, or
either.
offensive.
Too, yeah, he's just a dude,
Yeah,
and it establishes the character that she would easily go and do it, but he can work his wiles better
yeah, he can work
than
his
she could.
masculine wiles on the general.
Yeah, I've never heard that, but I like that. He can work his wiles better. But he's like, okay, what if? And again, he's not trade. He knows how she works.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
what is she
they
really
have
good at? She's
they have a
competitive,
dynamic in the show.
right? And he's like, tell you what, let's make a deal. If you can sell more wrapping paper than
So
I can,
Rose can go to Disneyland.
so Rose can go to Disneyland, and this is helping a kid, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I like that they're not competitive in the aspect that she also has a kid and she's competing against him. No, no, no. That doesn't have time for kids. Um,
There's actually an episode of the show where that comes up.
I kind of figured. Yeah.
Where she tries to the company basically like figures out like which employees are most genetically compatible and encourages them to date. And
Okay.
Veronica doesn't want to do that because she's not interested in that. But the company did tell her that Lem's sperm is the most like genetically compatible with her like reproductive system. So she tries to coerce him into freezing his sperm because she's like, "Oh, I don't want one of these monsters right now, but you know, I might someday, and if I do."
That sounds like a funny episode.
It is, yeah.
But so the long story, the main bit of these two in this episode is competitively, aggressively selling wrapping paper,
Yep.
right? Like gift paper,
Yep.
to employees, business partners. Yeah. So immediately, we're not even like a chunk of the way through the episode, but I'm like, you know what? I like this show.
Yeah.
Like spoilers for my rating at the end, but it's like I I can see people going, "Oh no, I haven't watched it," or "Oh, it's not really like for me," or whatever like that. But like, I don't understand how anybody could dislike this.
So to just blow through the episode because folks, both me and Cal have things to do today. To just
And we could probably just like go over all the jokes. It and this is suffering from success. We could go over like all of the jokes and like how well written it is, but it's kind of like how we do core when we talk. Oh, and then they fought, and it was like really cool. And then Optimus was like, and like did this with his axe, and then like a karate, and oh, and then he kicked him and he grabbed him with his by his leg. Um, then we'd just be recounting the episode, but it's
right. So
the plot. We can talk about the plots. Yeah.
yeah, so to kind of blow through it, the whole wrapping paper thing, we find out that another girl in Rose's
Is
classroom is selling more.
somehow selling more.
And Ted's like, and Ted, because both Ted and Veronica are fiercely competitive people.
He's
Uh,
surprised.
he's surprised, and he's looking at the results on a computer. And Rose is like, "Oh, you can click on the person's name to see them." And he's like, "Oh, well, let's see who's not going to Disneyland or whatever." And he
Yeah.
clicks on her picture, and it's a girl in a wheelchair. And he's like, "Oh." And so Rose immediately is like, everyone at school hates me because Veronica gets like fiercely like competitive about this and actually starts like selling more and more wrapping paper. And Rose is like, everyone at school hates me because I'm beating the disabled kid. And so Ted
And then
decides
Ted, I like Ted's response. He's like, actually, you would be not bigoted. What's the word? You would be
treating
basically
her as an equal
you would be treating her as an equal because you're
because
not letting her win.
that's something that Veronica tells him. And or no, well, anyway, Veronica tells him that. And yeah, so he tells Rose that you would be treating her as an equal. And she's like, can we just please not win? And he's like, oh, okay. So he goes and talks to
Because
Veronica
this is
about it.
what his daughter wants.
Yeah. And so he goes and talks to Veronica about it. And Veronica is like, well, treat her as an equal. All people should be treated equally. And Ted is like, that's what you tell kids, but that's not what you actually do in real life.
That's the joke. That was it for me. Well, yeah, that's what you tell kids, but that's not what you do in real life. And I was like, okay,
So throughout the episode, Linda is running around causing mayhem around the office, insulting
having
people
mood
randomly.
swings too. Like
Well,
it's
that's
not just
the mood swings come after they take the patch off of her.
right because she drops. Yeah, yeah.
So she goes to Ted and Veronica, and it says to Veronica, she's like, "Wow, you are," and she's kind of acting drunk,
Oh,
essentially.
very complimentary, almost like a manic like thing
Yeah,
where
yeah,
she's
she's
like, "Oh, like you're so good looking and you're like so tall. I don't know how you juggle your
your calves are amazing." And Ted is like, hey, like chill out, basically. And Linda's like, well, oh, well, maybe you'd like me more if I was more like Veronica. And she pulls her hair back. She's like, look at me, I'm Veronica. I have my hair tied back. I go to the washroom and don't wash my hands. That's right, I saw you.
That's right, I saw you." Again, and then immediately I was like, "Oh, fuck, that's what Christopher means by like boom, 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 boom." Like every like line of dialogue, it's like and it's character development,
Yeah.
right? Like the
Um,
mustache. Remember when we wasted all of the adhesive bandages when we were trying to see what you would look like with a mustache,
yeah.
right? It's little things like that, and it's just like, that's right, I saw you, right?
um,
That establishes character, and I really enjoy that.
so they tell her to chill out, basically, and Lem and Phil fess up about the whole energy patch thing.
Yeah,
And
especially because if it's going to threaten her Linda's Linda's
Ted,
career.
yeah, Ted tells Linda, he's like, "Hey, we're gonna cut you a lot of slack, but you need to shut up and not say something that will potentially endanger your job."
Yeah,
So, like, Ted is a nice guy, but like here, he's actually being a boss.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and like not in like a mean way or anything. Like he's just
No.
like asserting the fact that like, hey, you need to chill out, lady.
And that's when Lem and Phil are like, okay, we got some things to say because they are they seem genuinely good,
Yeah, yeah. So
kind. Yeah,
yeah, so they take they go to Linda, and after they fess up, they go to Linda and they tell her about it, and they're like, "Hey, can we have the Band-Aid back?" And she's like, "Ew, no, that's gross. Why?" And they're like, "Well, like those times where you say you're giving someone a Band-Aid and you accidentally dose them with a experimental energy patch? Yeah, it's kind of just like
experimental
that.
military grade energy patch.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind of like
it's,
that."
it's kind of like that.
Um, and so their punishment is that they basically have to babysit Linda.
Right.
There's also a scene where Linda, like after she's had the patch removed, is like crying, like holding an everything bagel. And Lem and Phil walk by and they're like, "Hey, what's Linda's crying? what's going on with her? And Phil is like, maybe we shouldn't get involved or whatever. And Lem is like, yeah, but I mean, she's crying and we like her, so maybe we should see what's up.
And indeed, at home, like they had to bring her like home and monitor her outside of work.
But the thing that she was crying about at work was that the holding an everything bagel, the plight of the she's like the plight of the Jewish people. After all they've been through, they've still given us the most perfect creation ever, the energy or the everything bagel. It's everything you want in bagel form.
I had to explain that joke because I was my partner had seen me watching part of it,
Yeah.
and I made a everything bagel joke ripping off the show.
Nice.
Actually, right?
It's everything you could ever want in bagel form.
And the plight of the Jews thing and the everything you could ever want. And I had to explain the bread making and the ancient.
Yeah.
When you have to explain a joke, it's not funny. And thank God that the show never feels like, again, another thing that the show does properly. It doesn't explain itself.
No. There's also a bunch of like another thing I like about the show. There's a bunch of PSAs for Viridian Dynamics.
Yeah. I I like that.
And like they're like presented as like corporate PSAs that are like really happy and upbeat, but they're like if you pay close attention to them, they're actually the messages are actually kind of sinister a lot of the time.
They're dark. It's almost like the Fallout video game series.
Yeah,
Oh, in it, and it's like humor, right?
yeah.
Where they're actually kind of dark. Or like old anti communist like Cold War PSAs. They're almost like propaganda ish. I
So,
like that.
yeah. So Ted spends the rest of the episode trying to buy back all the wrapping paper that he sold to people,
Right.
and
To
people
lose. And Veron
so Rose could lose. And people are like, "Oh, well, why?" And he comes up with a bunch of excuses for why, like, "Oh, it's
yeah.
hazardous to your health or whatever." But
Lead lined and yeah, blah blah.
one of them is that you can, if you hold it up to light, you can see Santa's penis.
Randomly. And that shows that he's so good at bullshitting.
Yeah.
He can just dead face like lie to people to like get what he wants.
And so
Um
Ted is like, oh, and another thing that Ted does in this show is, and this is a very 2000s thing, like he will address the audience. He'll look at the camera and like talk to the audience. It's very
that's
like
so nonchalant that I don't even really I never even thought about it.
yeah.
So
It's
subtle.
it's a very like office style like mid to late 2000s trend in comedies. Um so he tells us the audience that he was able to buy I think like 90% of the wrapping paper back. He's like the and the other 10% were willing to risk certain death just to see Santa's junk. As he walks by, you see a bunch of employees holding wrapping paper up to a light. And the camera doesn't even focus on that. It's just like something that's going on in the background, which is humor I really
You
appreciate.
know what? I didn't catch that. So that I like that a lot.
But Veronica has become hyper competitive and
Doesn't want to lose anyway.
doesn't want to lose anyway. And she tells Ted about this. And she goes around like upping her sales game and selling even more wrapping paper than before. And Lem Phil, their punishment for dosing Linda is they have to babysit her. And so they go back to her place, and Linda is like, "Hey guys, I made cookies. Hey, it's really fun having a sleepover." And Phil is like, "Well, we're told we have to babysit you, and we tried to do this at my place, but you bit me."
Is it her play?
It's her place, yeah.
Right, yeah. And you bit me.
And so
And
she
then they're
puts
like eating the cookies.
they're eating the cookies and complaining about how inedible they are.
And he's like, just shut up. Pretend that they're good. He's like, but they're not. Why would I pretend that they're good? And it
Lem is like these cookies are because Linda like her mood swing like immediately goes from being like happy, hey, sleepover, and they're like, hey, you just made cookies, and she's like, eat them angrily. And
Mm.
Lem is like, I don't know if I can eat another one of these cookies, and Phil is just like, just eat it, eat
Eat it. Eat the cookie.
it, just eat it.
And so that's the dynamic. I like that they're their own characters, but instead of being a socially awkward one and then an autistic one, Big Bang
Yeah,
Theory,
yep,
they are both just awkward and they kind of help each other. There's not like a normal one, but he's short and like has glasses and he's socially awkward. And then there's like a normalish looking one, but he is neurodivergent. It's
no,
these are
they're
just two dudes.
they're two dudes who are both awkward, but in different ways, and they kind of help each other through social
That's what
situations.
I mean. And they help each other through the social engagements that they have rather than one telling another one that he's being weird all the time. And
Yeah.
I I really appreciate that.
So Ted ends up having dinner with the general. Oh, and earlier Ted had mentioned he's like, if the general tries to do the Lady and the Tramp thing again, I'm out. He's having dinner
Right,
with the
because he loses to
because he loses to Veronica. Yeah,
Veronica.
and that was the bet
But at
that they
that point
had.
he
That
doesn't
that
even like care. He's like, you know what? Yeah, okay.
yeah.
And he goes to
That
dinner with the general.
he goes to dinner with the general, and the general is like, "Yeah, I think we can go an additional 10 cents per unit." And Ted's like, "Really? That's great." And the
Right,
general's like,
because he awkwardly brings up, hey, we're running like we're nearing the budget for like these units. It's not like really working. And I hate to do this to you, but oh no problem. For somebody as cute as you, blah
"You're a
blah blah,
handsome man,
right?
Ted.
Right. And
Hope
I
it's
don't know how
not.
to say this, so I'm just gonna say it. You're a handsome man, Ted.
Don't know how. Don't know if that's inappropriate or not. People get
Oh
so
man,
uptight these days."
so these days, and I'm like, I like this because it's putting a hat on like that very inappropriate like
Right.
workplace, regardless of gender or sexuality.
Yeah.
That boomer kind of, oh, don't know if this is inappropriate, but
People are so damn sensitive these days.
right. And I'm like,
It's poking
I
fun at that.
appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that. Right. And then something like clicks because I can't remember. The general said something
Mm.
about it. Do you remember? Do you recall like the eureka moment where they decide to okay, so the eureka moment is he manages to convince and it's kind of resolved off screen in one of those PSAs. But the general and Ted, something one of them says or their predicament that they're in throughout dinner results in, you know what? Like people are afraid of Americans dropping things out of planes over them. So how do we get
Wrap them in wrapping paper.
I
It's
just
like
love this.
presents dropping on them.
So how do we get the like the populations to come and like accept these and to show our good faith? Wrap them in like wrapping paper to
And
show that we're friendly
it's the wrapping paper. He sells wrapping paper for the
on
girl
behalf
of the girl in the wheelchair.
of the wheelchair girl.
So the military ends up buying like 5,000 rolls of wrapping paper.
Like 5 million units of like wrapping paper. And then because he was going to win because Veronica was like selling it.
This is what I mean about what I meant earlier about two subplots actually like cleverly converging together. That's it's great writing in my
And
opinion.
then the finale I find is kind of like humorous. A great outro. There's no wind down
Yeah.
at the end of this show. He's like he's they're going to work again. They're going up in a elevator or something like that. And he's all like, "Well, technically, I sold more units than you, so I won." And Veronica was like, "No, I won because we were supposed to sell units for your daughter,
Because
which
you
I
went
did."
to I convinced you to go to dinner with the general, and Ted's like, that's not what we were
And the bet
competing over.
was,
And she's like, wasn't it though?
wasn't
Basically.
it? And he's like, Not
And
really. And she's like, I won.
I'm kind of with Veronica on this. Like, what she wanted was the units sold, and for Ted to go to dinner with the general and to sell these units at a higher price, which is what he
Because
did.
ultimately she didn't have to go to dinner
Yeah,
with him. And that's what they were competing over to do anyway. So
yeah.
technically she won, even though she,
Even though she lost the wrapping paper competition,
and I'm like, okay, yeah,
which she refers to as toilet paper at one point, and Ted is like wrapping paper. She's like, "It's not my fault, Ted, that I don't listen to you."
right. Like it's
It's
just about
not.
numbers. Oh, she goes on to a bunch of tech bros in the episode
Yeah,
and talks to them as if she's selling them stonk, like how much more, like stocks, like how
derivatives.
much
Yeah,
more derivatives, how much more valuable this is going to be once like Christmas comes around.
you
And
buy people's wrapping paper debt.
oh,
Yeah,
right.
so funny. So at the end of the episode, Linda goes down to Lemon Phil, back down to Lemon Phil. So the episode actually ends where it starts, in
Yep.
Lemon Phil's
Yep.
lab. So Linda goes down there and she's like, "Hey guys, my back has been really itchy since you guys dosed me." And they're like, "Well,
Can you take a look at it?
they're like, well, better than being crazy," like very flippantly. And she's like, "Yeah, I don't know. I just maybe I should talk to a doctor or a lawyer or something." And Lem is
Yeah.
like,
You know
as,
what? Let's have a look.
as two scientists with very little money, we suggest that you don't talk to a lawyer.
Our professional opinion is that you don't talk to a lawyer. And she takes down the back of her like shirt or like whatever
Exposes
like
her
that,
her lady back.
her lady back. And she's got feathers.
Feathers. And Lem and Phil freak out and they're whispering. They're like, "Feathers, feathers." She's like, "What?
Shh. Like
What?
what?
Feathers? Chicken lady, chicken lady." And she turns around and is like,
After their
I,
freak out,
she's like,
she
"I
lets
can't."
it boil for a
Yeah.
minute or so.
And she's like, I can't be a chicken lady. There's so many things I want to do with my life, like get married and have children and glue feathers to my back to convince idiots to teach idiot scientists a lesson about dosing someone.
About
And
drugging someone while they're at work.
Phil is like, you can still do all of those things. Oh wait.
No, you can still do all of those things. You have your whole life ahead of. Oh, wait.
And the last shot is like her walking away with talking about how like basically how fucked up and crazy Viridian Dynamics is as she herself like dusts like feathers off of
Down
her
the
back.
hallway past all of these other employees, and she's like, wow, everybody's a freak here. But
Yeah.
she's like itching her back, and like feathers are flying out everywhere, and everyone's like stopping and like looking at her.
And that's some fun ironic humor right there.
I liked that.
So that was episode 5 of Better Off Ted. Cal, you just caught a random episode of Better Off Ted. Would you tune in next week?
I would tune in next week, and in fact, actually just going to start from the beginning. Like I'm
Sweet.
actually going to check out the series.
Oh, something I forgot to mention. Oh, and I obviously I've been gushing about this show. I watched through it like multiple times. Obviously, I would tune in next week, and in fact, I've been rewatching it lately since we've been talking about it. Um, One day, about 5 years after I discovered this show, I was walking down the street in Victoria, like walking home, and I happened across a box on someone's front lawn that said free. And it was a box of like DVDs and random DVDs and Blu-rays. What I found was a still sealed copy of the first season of Better Off Ted on DVD. And I'm like, holy shit, like I fucking love this show. What? This is like some weird, very weird like bit of happenstance here. And I still have that
Yeah.
DVD to this day. Yeah, it was
Huh.
I was walking from like Tillicum to Uptown, and just one of the houses past the this is local talk, people, but just one of the houses past
Run
the
along now, local talk.
one of the houses, like when you're going from Tillicum and then like you pass like a 7-Eleven and then turn left and there's that kind of windy road where you pass the park. um I used to live on one of those side streets there, Whittier, And so me and a friend were walking from Tillicum Mall to my house. And so we were on that like windy road that goes toward Uptown.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, there was just on someone's front lawn, there was a box that said free. And there was a sealed copy of Better Off Ted season 1 in there.
It was meant for you.
It was like it was a crazy coincidence.
Fate has spoken. So
anyway, that
was
unanimous. Anyway, that was episode 66 of the Lazorcomb podcast. Best way to support the show is to go to patreon.com/lazorcomb, LAZORCOMB. We're at the single $5 Gary tier. You get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our Patreon exclusive podcast, the Super Lazorcomb Patreon Super Show, which we just recorded a new episode of finally, right before doing this. So if you want to get
basically us BSing, shooting the shit, talking about this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
News, international news, and more personal stuff.
News items, personal stuff. I actually name drop like a place I used to work at for I think the first time ever in front of a microphone.
Almost crying. We were laughing. What was it? Oh, we were dunking on like Elon and like making fucking jokes about him.
Oh, and Gen Z adopting fake British accents on TikTok. Anyway, so patreon.com/lazorcomb. Follow me on Twitter at lazorcomb, spelled the same way. Cal, where can people find you?
Find me on TikTok or Twitter, NeoCal, NEO_KAL.
We'll be back next time with episode 67 of the Lazorcomb podcast, where we're going to be talking about community. And to figure out which episode we're going to talk about, I'm searching for things. I'm doing a Bing search.
We're doing a Bing, folks.
Doing a Bing. There are 110 episodes of Community overall, so heading to the old trusty random number generator, which I wonder if screen share works again. Let's try it. Share. Is it working?
Yeah.
It's actually working.
Choo-choo. 6 seasons in a movie?
6 seasons in a movie. So one random number between 1 and 110. And here we go. 79. This is one of the later ones.
Ugh.
No, you know what? It's in the season that after Dan Harmon was fired, so I'm re-rolling. I don't care.
Sorry, folks. We're not doing it.
The fucking share screen bar is obstructing the tab. You know what? Let's just review the episode that we were talking about earlier.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
We're going to do the multi-dimensional paradigm episode. We will figure out which
we'll figure out which
paradigms of human memory, maybe. Perhaps. Well,
is the episode that's a clip I don't know, whatever, we'll figure it out. It's the multi-dimensional one.
The dice episode.
Yeah, the dice episode. Anyway, we'll be back next time with that. And until then, I've been The Siege, one of your hosts.
And I'm NeoCal.
Thanks for listening. We will Ted you next time.
We'll beast mode.
We'll drop a hypodermic needle in your shoulder, in your lady shoulder next time.
Wrapped with gift
wrapping.
Wrapping.
Bye.